Stephen A., what's your takeaway from the Rockets-Clippers and that whole mess?
Well, first of all, that's mess that does not need to be happening. The fact that it happened on the day we're celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Talking about nonviolence or whatever. I mean, evidently the optics apparently didn't matter to most people. All of those are good guys. We're not trying to excoriate anybody. We're only talking about the incident at hand. The person that I'm looking at and I'm holding most accountable for all of this is CP3.
I'm rolling with that.
I'm holding CP3 accountable, and that's my man. That's somebody I got a lot of love for. But on this particular day, he's accountable, and here's why. You are the point guard for the Houston Rockets. According to the reports, assuming, and I'm holding him accountable based on the reports, according to the reports, you had some of those players go through that back door because there's some kind of back way that connects one of the locker rooms to another. Well, who would know that better than CP3? You got something to do with that, okay? We all know you didn't particularly like Austin Rivers anymore. That's like the worst kept secret in the NBA. You didn't get along with Austin Rivers. Austin Rivers evidently was running his mouth to Trevor Ariza while Trevor Ariza was on the court. Trevor Ariza wanted to get at him. James Harden upset that he hurt, he can't play because he know he probably would have dropped 40 on them. So he got attitude and he coming to the defense of his teammates. That's fair enough. Clint Capella was knocking on the front door according to the reports. I don't understand that quite. I don't understand what he had to do with it. But that's neither here nor there. Here's where we have to hold CP3 accountable. And I say this with nothing but profound respect because he's a great dude and he means a lot to the NBA. You're the president of the Players Association. You can't find yourself in a situation. I know you were going back and forth with Blake Griffin, and y'all was spewing whatever y'all was spewing at each other in the first half, and then ultimately Blake Griffin brushed your coach, D'Antoni, all right, who ain't Doc Rivers, who you had a falling out with there, and then you get in Blake Griffin's face. We get all of that. You are the president of the Players Association. You are the composed, astute, highly intellectual individual who is a leader for the players and a leader in the NBA. You cannot find yourself in that kind of situation. To put yourself in that situation shows somewhere along the way, no matter how, it's misinterpreted, if the reporting is inaccurate by those who were there, whatever, from an optics perspective, to use your word, Max, you put yourself in a situation where it is clear that it looked like your personal feelings camouflaged your judgment. And not only did you make yourself look bad, but everybody around you that was involved in this kind of situation. And I didn't even get into the fact that we are living in an age, which is what I would call a Colin Kaepernick era, where you've got folks out there that have hijacked the real issue that he was trying to bring attention to and are looking for every excuse under the sun to paint an African-American athlete in a negative light. If anybody is cognizant of it, if anybody is intelligent enough to comprehend that as an athlete, it is CP3. To find yourself in this situation is just not a good look for him on this day.
And on point well taken on Martin Luther King Day, Stephen A., although Chuck and Shaq were cracking up in the studio because I think that they assumed that it was nonviolent, but it's still a point well taken. CP3 is known as, a guy who is very, very intense. And it doesn't always make it great for other guys to play with him. Now, some people can handle it, some people can't. And the argument, as it was with Kobe, is that he'll weed out the weak. And you don't want those kind of teammates. But I got the feeling when he was playing in L.A. that there wasn't joy on that team, that people weren't happy to be at work. And you see a difference in performance in basketball teams. Some teams can deal with that kind of intensity. But generally, you get the sense, like with Golden State, those guys enjoy playing together, enjoy coming to work, enjoy being around each other, and it shows up on the court. That wasn't the case with CP3 on the Clippers. The question was that Chris Paul or Doc Rivers? Because Doc Rivers, let's start with Austin Rivers, his son. As GM and coach, not only does he give his son playing time at a time when Austin Rivers was not an NBA caliber player, because partly of opportunity, he has become an NBA caliber player. Not a great one, but an NBA caliber player. But he was, at the time, what was called the D-League caliber player, really, when he was, and then got a fat contract on top of that. I'm sure there's a lot of resentment about that, particularly because he is said to carry himself with an air, a Duke guy, a guy who seems arrogant to others and who hasn't earned it on the court. And Blake Griffin seems arrogant to many around the league, and he has earned it on the court, but there's always been this sense that guys can take shots at Blake Griffin and maybe Clippers teammates weren't going to do anything about it, etc. So Chris Paul comes in, you're right, with the, especially on MLK Day, Stephen A., with a chip on his shoulder and maybe a greater responsibility to behave better than he did in that situation than he realized. But I want to say this quickly before, Jalen, you go. I would hope, not that we live in a post-racial world, that's unrealistic considering especially what's been going on in our country over the last, year or so, and obviously for hundreds of years before that. So I understand we're not living in a post-racial world, but I would like to think that we are beyond the time when an African-American athlete has to be constantly aware that there are negative stereotypes about African Americans and that he therefore somehow represents an entire group of people constantly and has to always be aware of that and not just worry about his own situation and his own behavior. I'm not denying that exists, but that's too bad that it does.